Well, hello, everybody, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Bala, for the wonderful opportunity to speak today. And I'm glad to see my friends from UNC here, Dr. Ted and his contingent. I didn't know I needed to wear my Carolina hat that you gave me the other day at Ocean Cluster. But at any rate, it's in my closet in a prominent place, even though I went to Duke. Don't boo, don't throw anything. My husband, Jim, and I have been here in Iceland for 7 months, dispatched here by President Biden, and we have loved every minute of it. We're from Houston, Texas, which, of course, Texas has its own spirit of entrepreneurship for many, many years. And I always say we found everyone here to be welcoming and friendly, just like Texans. And so it's good also to see some folks from the United States coming over and sharing in the beauty and the spirit that is Iceland. No better manifested than by Startup Iceland. And Bala, congratulations on 10 incredible years. Let's give it up. I mean, what an amazing... You probably don't know that Bala is actually a Texan. At least we claim him. He spent a lot of time in Texas, and his first daughter was born in St. Luke's, about 10 minutes from our home in Houston. So we lost him to Iceland for love, but we have not given up on getting him back. We need good ideas in Texas, too. In fact, now that you've spent 10 years here, how about coming back to Houston and getting us motivated down there, too? We'd love to have Bala and his wife back, and we haven't given up hope. I'm honored to be here with you today as President Biden's representative to Iceland. And let me share with you that one of the great joys of serving here is that Iceland and the United States not only have been longtime and cherished allies of 80 years plus, but we share the same values in so many respects. We cherish democracy. We seek to advance human rights, especially women's rights, around the world. And in no realm have those common values been more manifest than in our joining together to push back against the outrageous Russian aggression and support the Ukrainians. And let me take this moment to thank so much Iceland, all of you here from Iceland, and businesses in Iceland, particularly, or as part of the whole effort in supporting the Ukrainians. I noticed that Controlant is a sponsor here today, and they're one of many Icelandic companies that are sharing their technology with the Ukrainians to help them survive this brutal onslaught. So thank you for your support in Iceland. It means very much to the United States. And obviously, it's imperative that we prevail in this conflict, that the Ukrainians prevail, who are really fighting for all of us. They're fighting for the soul of democracy over there. And so we thank them and we thank you for helping with the effort. Let me also congratulate our Fulbright alumni in Iceland, including Arnar Gunnarsson, Kristján Sigurðsson, I'm still learning, and Solveig Sigurðardóttir. You know, the names, I'm still learning to say them correctly. And Kristján, who's here today taking pictures, when I mess up, he will school me later, I can assure you. When I had my welcome video and I was trying to say some Icelandic phrases, kept saying, yeah, I thought I was doing pretty well. And he said, no, it's not right. It's not right. So anyway, finally we got it to an acceptable level, but forgive me if I don't get your names quite correctly, because I'm still learning the letters and the nuances of Icelandic. But anyway, Solveig Sigurðardóttir, for all the work all of you are doing to support Ukrainian refugees in Iceland. And I have a really special announcement today. I am delighted to announce that Startup Iceland has just been awarded a grant from the United States State Department to develop and support Ukrainian refugee entrepreneurs in Iceland. So please give Startup Iceland a big round of applause. And, of course, Iceland really is a global leader in so many areas. Gender equality with the first democratically elected female president and a long line of inspiring women since then. In the Council of Europe realm and the human rights realm, with the fabulously successful and recently concluded Council of Europe held in Reykjavik, in Harpa, not very long ago, within the last couple of weeks, which was a huge undertaking, and at the initiative of Iceland, developed a registry for human rights abuses in Ukraine, so that when the war is won, or whenever appropriate, perhaps before then, there will be a data point, a data center for collection of the evidence of all the atrocities and human rights abuses, and they are unfathomable what the Russians are doing in Ukraine. So there will be a body of evidence with which to hold them account. And that is a wonderful thing that Iceland has gotten going. At least 42, I believe we're up to 43 now. But at any rate, there are 43 countries that have signed, which was sort of beyond everybody's expectations. Normally people say, oh, we have to think about it, we'll get back to you. But people signed with alacrity, and it's a very powerful statement to the world. And of course, Iceland is a leader in democracy itself, with Parliament tracing its roots back to Thingvellir more than 1,000 years ago. I'm sure you've been there. So that's what I want to talk to you about today, are the shared values and how we apply those as artificial intelligence develops at an exponentially rapid clip. And what I thought we would do is, the Biden administration, of course, we all know that AI doesn't even really bear repeating, and I won't go into all the ways we all know AI has changed our lives already and will continue to change our lives. In fact, you may or may not know whether my speech was developed by AI. Now, it wasn't Carrin F, who's here today, and I wrote it, but she did plug in speech for AI delivered by Ambassador Patman into ChatGPT to see what it would generate. And according to Carrin, it not only generated a pretty good speech, it included anecdotes about my family I've used in other speeches in different contexts. I used to chair our transit authority, a $1 billion agency in Houston, before I took this job. And I gave many speeches in that. It picked up things from those speeches and put them in. So it's mind-blowing and a little scary, a lot scary, actually. If you watch the recent hearing, particularly with Senator Blumenthal and Hawley and Booker and others about AI, and with Josh Altman's testimony. And I actually encourage all of you to watch the hearing. It's on the web. It's really interesting and informative. So what I thought I would discuss with you today is what the Biden administration is doing in this space. Obviously, there's an explosion of interest in Washington now on artificial intelligence, and some fear that we're entering the space too late in terms of regulation, in terms of legislation, in terms of putting in place a framework that makes sure that AI doesn't run counter to our values. And a lot of the work being done by the Biden administration is through the National Institute of Science and Technology. There's a whole body of material on the web, handbooks as to how to develop your AI in ways that are that avoid some of the pitfalls, et cetera. And I encourage you, if you're interested, to go on and look at that. But I'll just talk today about what is called a blueprint for a Bill of Rights and what that actually calls for. It's posted on the web, and a lot of people from the State Department have spoken on it. And essentially, it's just 5 principles that should guide developers, users, anyone associated with AI to make sure, again, that it's not used to undermine our democracy and our values, but rather, hopefully, will reinforce it. The first principle, and let me say that this blueprint was developed with just extensive consultation with partners. There were all these meetings all over the country where views were solicited. What are the problems with AI? What are the strengths? How do we avoid the worst? And some of the scariest things that can happen with AI. How do we keep AI, in just one example of the dangers of interfering with our elections? I know Senator Cory Booker, who was just here, as a matter of fact, and of course fell in love with Iceland like everyone else does, wants to come back as soon as possible, has introduced legislation to try to counter that impact. So there are essentially five principles that have been developed as part of the blueprint for the AI Bill of Rights. The first, of course, is that we want the systems to be safe and effective. All too often, we see systems that have failed or proven harmful because of insufficient testing or oversight. For example, just a few examples to bring this into the concrete. A model was developed to predict the likelihood of sepsis in hospitalized patients, and it was implemented at hundreds of hospitals. But an independent study showed the model predictions underperformed and instead caused alert fatigue due to excessive false alert regarding the likelihood of sepsis. So while on the one hand, it can be used to diagnose disease, to do research on diseases, on the other hand, it can lead to false diagnoses if, in fact, protections aren't built into the models. In another example, people of color who quoted and criticized racist messages on a social media platform were themselves silenced by the platform's automated moderation system, which couldn't distinguish between critique from the original hateful messages. A device developed to help people track and find lost items has been used as a tool by stalkers to track their victims' locations in violation of their safety and privacy. So those are just three of many examples that have been uncovered of deleterious uses of AI. And so it's imperative, obviously, that AI systems undergo rigorous testing, consultation, risk identification, and mitigation, not just before they're deployed, but continuously. And I think in his recent testimony, Sam Altman, the developer of ChatGPT, in the testimony I recommend that you watch, acknowledged that testing should occur at every stage of the process that can root out those problems. Algorithmic discrimination protections is the number 2 principle. We must confront algorithmic discrimination head-on. Unjustified differences in treatment based on race, gender, age, religion, national origin, disability, or any other protected characteristic are unacceptable. And they occur in algorithms because, for example, to give you an example, one company implemented a hiring tool that reviewed the features of the company's employees, which were predominantly men, and then rejected women applicants for discriminatory reasons. Resumes which included the word women on them as part of an organizational title were actually penalized in the candidate ranking because, of course, if you base future decisions on past decisions, you're going to embed all the biases and discrimination that might have existed in those past decisions going forward and solidify it. So that's another way in which algorithmic tools can be a detriment to effective decision making as opposed to supporting it. And I think one of the ways that has been proposed in the AI Bill of Rights to address this is we need to ensure equity assessment, use of representative data, and protective measures against proxies for demographic features. Those are, as you're developing in your startups AI or using it, hopefully these principles, which are pretty obvious really, and you probably already have them in your minds, but will be useful in helping develop an effective AI that doesn't counter our values. Obviously, the third principle is data privacy, of paramount concern in this age of ubiquitous technology. And so individuals, according to the AI Bill of Rights, should be protected from abusive data practices and should have agency over how their data is used. For example, an insurer could collect data from a person's social media presence as part of deciding what life insurance rates they should be offered. Another example is a local public housing authority installed a facial recognition system at its entrance to its housing complexes to assist law enforcement with identifying individuals viewed via camera. Okay, now I messed up this sentence, but let me start that one over because I have all the wrong emphasis on it. Another example occurred when a local public housing authority installed a facial recognition system at the entrance to its housing complexes to assist law enforcement with identifying individuals viewed via camera when police reports are filed. And as a result, of course, photographs of the housing complexes and visitors were sent to the local police department and made available for scanning by the department's facial recognition software. So I think all of us have realized that nothing is truly private anymore. Everybody knows everything about you if they want to, but to the extent that that problem can be mitigated in AI as opposed to exacerbated in AI, it's something that obviously should be considered. Another example, a department store used predictive analytics applied to collected consumer data to determine that a teenage girl was pregnant and sent maternity clothing ads and other baby-related ads to her house, causing a lot of angst in her family. Do you know something we don't know? And in fact, she was pregnant, and it was a complete violation of her privacy. So we need stringent measures to ensure consent is meaningful and that data collection conforms to reasonable expectations. And we also need heightened oversight for sensitive domains such as health, education, and criminal justice. Surveillance technology should be subject to heightened scrutiny to ensure there are limits in place that protect individual privacy and civil liberties. The fourth principle concerns transparency. This would go a long way, I think. Individuals have a right to know when an automated system is impacting them and how it makes its decisions. On a light note, you may have seen a recent headline, I forget which publication it was in, that if music is generated by AI instead of a true creative composer, how do you feel about that? Is it as interesting to you or appealing to you? That's a lighter example, although it's actually not light to those in the music industry. But there are very serious examples as well. For example, an older disabled individual had been cut off from social welfare benefits without explanation, and it was later determined that the state had recently adopted a new algorithm to determine eligibility, but the delay in a timely explanation and lack of transparency in decision-making made it difficult for the attorney and the client to understand or contest the decision. So you get this result, you don't know why, you can't reach anybody live to figure it out. And so that's one of the significant reforms that was discussed at the recent hearing in Washington is how do we make clear that an algorithm is providing data and give people an opportunity to contest the methodology and the input of the algorithm. Because, of course, obviously any algorithm is only as good as the data entered into it and the methodology it employs. And of course, part of this is plain language documentation, explanations, and people should be notified of significant changes in their system's functionality. The fifth principle has to do with human alternatives, consideration, and fallback. We must maintain our humanity, quite literally. We've all had the experience of trying to get through a business or government to solve a problem, and you cannot find a way to get a human on the phone. We know how frustrating that is. All of you are way too young to remember, but Saturday Night Live used to have a send-up on the phone company before it had even been split up. This is really the dark ages. I, however, do remember it. And the joke was that Lily Tomlin played a phone company operator, and when people called with frustration, she would say, "Thank you," and just hang up without addressing them. And it was this hilarious. Everybody in the nation found it hilarious. Well, you have sort of the same thing going on here today. In fact, arguably even worse. So just to give you a couple of examples, a large corporation, for example, automated performance evaluation and other HR functions, leading to workers being fired by an automated system without the possibility of human review. That would annoy you, or other form of recourse. In another instance, for example, an unemployment benefit system required that applicants have a smartphone to verify their identity. But not everybody has a smartphone, believe it or not, in this day and time. And so that cut off a whole realm of people right there. So we have to ensure that human alternatives and fallbacks exist for AI systems. There should be a way for individuals to opt out of automated systems and access a human alternative where that's appropriate. In fact, I would say always, because I almost always, and I'm of the age that's not used, it's still not used to the extent to which automation is used. And of course, it just drives me nuts when you press 0 and you get another round of press 1 if, So it's even worse in the AI context, and that needs to be addressed. So these principles should inform the development, deployment, and use of AI, but they don't stand alone. They should be underpinned by a broader understanding of the role of AI in society, one that is conscious of its transformative potential, but also of its potential harms. And so this blueprint for the AI Bill of Rights, we hope, offers a framework, just a framework, to guide the ethical use of AI, protecting civil rights, liberties, and privacy in the area of artificial intelligence. And one of the things that came up repeatedly in the hearing on AI with Sam Altman was, what would those of you testifying, it was he and 2 other people, all of whom were very interesting, what would you propose for regulation? Because it's one of the rare instances in which, as some of the senators pointed out, businesses are actually asking for increased regulation. Sam Altman understands the danger of AI, the potential tragedy of the results of AI. And he agrees that there should be an agency, that there should be oversight, that there should be regulations that move in before it's too late. And he and others had, and these are not necessarily the Biden administration, I'm talking now about what came out in the hearing. At the right time, I feel confident that President Biden's administration will be proposing legislation and regulations to help address this. But right now, one of the important things you can do is, as you're studying this issue and involved in this space, keep note of the pitfalls of, if there were legislation or if there were regulation, what should it address? What should it say to try to mitigate these impacts on society? That alone is very helpful, and we at the embassy will be delighted to take that back to Washington. Now, you know, when I speak to, I know some of you are here from the States and other locales, and some of you are here, many of you are here from Iceland. And I always feel a little funny telling Icelanders what to do. And I don't mean to do that here because you're such a leader in all of these human rights spaces. But to the extent that what the United States is implementing is helpful to you, and to the extent that these principles are helpful to you, we thank you for considering them, because eventually we're going to have as much as possible a global consensus on these things. AI doesn't respect borders, and so we'll need a global consensus on these things, and all be needing to work together on how to make this a net boon for society, which it can be, our societies, as opposed to something that's very harmful. So I love what Bala said. He's an optimist. And so I let us all move forward today with optimism and resolve. We know that the decisions we make today will profoundly impact the generations to come. And I really do have to end these days with something that doesn't directly relate to AI, but governs our lives in the world. And that is, let me close again by thanking the Ukrainian people for their courage in standing up for democracy at enormous personal sacrifice. And for those of you from all the many countries, including the United States, I'm proud to say, who have stood with them in this existential battle for our values. So thank you so very much for having me today.
Thank you very much.